So the first thing I'm going to show is this is a type 0 malfunction. Now, it's not a malfunction, it's an empty gun. My bolt is locked to the rear. I've got an open chamber and my magazine is completely empty. So I start this during the training session this year by asking, what will you feel when you find an empty gun? So if I'm up and firing, what am I going to feel when my gun is empty? Some people say, well, I'm going to feel the bolt carrier group locking into the buffer space because the magazine has done its job and has locked the bolt back and not allowed that forward momentum, not allowed that buffer spring to send the bolt carrier group forward. So I don't feel the recoil the same way that I would when I still had rounds in my weapon. And if you've shot an AR, absolutely, you can feel that. However, with kit and under stress, you are very likely to not notice that. You are very likely to miss that feel. So we wanted to talk about another tactile way that you can establish what is wrong with your weapon. So if I am up and I have run dry and I am pulling a trigger and my gun is empty, what am I going to feel? I'm going to feel a dead, sloppy trigger. Okay, if I have felt a dead, sloppy trigger, the first thing I want to do is attempt to visually assess what the issue is. I'm just going to roll the gun over and try and visually assess the problem. Now in this circumstance, in this case, I can easily assess and visually identify that, yep, the gun is empty. However, I want to teach this by feel, and I want you to experience this by feel. So, mushy trigger, you roll over to assess, pretend it's O dark 30, and you can't visually identify the problem. We're going to rotate the gun into our workspace, bringing the buttstock underneath my arm so that I'm holding the gun in more of my standard handgun malfunction, refunction position. So I'm going to hold it right here. Now, the first thing I'm going to do, anytime I get a stoppage, after I've rolled it over into my workspace, so I'm going to grab the magazine and I'm going to do a push-pull. I'm not going to slap the magazine. I will talk about why later. I'm going to do a push-pull. Now, let me take the magazine out. So right now it's not seated, right? You can see it moving around. If I grab this and push-pull forward and backwards, I might be mistaken and think that the gun, that the magazine is properly seated into the weapon. So make sure that you push and pull. Push, pull. After that's been accomplished, you're going to grab the charging handle. The charging handle is the window to the soul for the AR. When I grab the charging handle and pull it, I'm going to find out what's wrong with the gun. It's completely dead, forward and backwards. Knowing that it's dead forward and backwards, I now know in the dark, without being able to visually identify the issue, that this weapon is empty. So, staying in this workspace, I'm going to press my magazine release. If I only do that, my magazine's not going to completely free fall. Make sure that when you're in your workspace and you depress this magazine release, strip it and throw it away. Get rid of that magazine. Now, depending on how you store this second mag, the secondary magazine, if it's in a pocket, if it's just tucked into your belt, you may end up grabbing it in a very funky chicken kind of position. So here I have what I would call the worst grip I can possibly get on this backup magazine. If I have the gun in my workspace right here slanted, when I get this in, it's going to stay. I don't have to have it seated for the magazine to actually stay put because of gravity. Now, with this funky chicken bad grip, as soon as it's seated, I'm going to rotate into a good strong grip. Push and pull. I'm making sure that this is seated. Again, there's no slap. I am also not going to, after I've accomplished my push-pull, I'm not going to bring my hand off and attempt to palm strike the bolt catch. Now, I wasn't trying to hit it, but what I wanted to illustrate is the fact that it very easily can be missed. If it is missed, you're going to be wasting time. So what I want is an insertion. At the same time I insert and I'm doing my push-pull, I'm rotating my thumb over. When my thumb is rotated over, once I've established the magazine is seated, I can immediately hit the bolt catch release. Now the gun is in battery, I've chambered around, I'm ready to go to work. Now, the second part of this is I've got the same condition in my rifle. It's completely empty, and I did not feel the bolt carrier group locking in the buffer tube as I was firing. I get a mushy trigger. This time it's not dark. This time I am able to get a visual diagnosis of what the problem is. I see that I've got my bolt lock to the rear. I see I've got nothing chambered. I know I've got an empty gun. If I depress the magazine release as I rotate the gun into my workspace, inertia and gravity are going to go ahead and pull that round out, or that magazine out, sorry. Push, pull, insert, bolt catched, back on target. But the next malfunction I want to talk about is the bolt over my brass. This malfunction right here. This is the condition that my rifle should be in, either in my car, in my trunk, or in the safe. Cruiser ready. The bolt is forward. I will close the dust cover. Magazine is firmly seated, and the weapon is on safe. If I grab this gun out and I jump out on a hot call or a hot incident, and I come up on target because I see the bad guy, defeat the safety, pull the trigger, and get a click, not a boom, what was my problem? Well, my malfunction is a bolt over my brass. If I were to visually check this, if it's out of the car, I'm going to see my dust cover is still closed. If I see that that's the case, I can simply rotate the gun into my workspace, push pull the magazine, grab the charging handle, pull it to the rear, and let go. Now, this time, I told you before that the charging handle is a window to the soul of the gun. This time, what did I feel with the charging handle? It was 100% normal. Everything felt right in the world. Now let me set this up again. Now, let's have my dust cover open. So with my dust cover open, what have I probably done? I've had to do a reload. I've done a reload to get the same malfunction. Click, I've got my bolt on top of my brass. It's sitting over the magazine. So what causes this malfunction? Well, forgetting to charge it is the first one. If you grab the gun out of the safe and it's in a proper cruiser ready condition, and you jump out on target and you pull the trigger, it's going to go click, not boom. It's because you forgot to charge it. If you're in the middle of a gunfight, or if you're up here at the range training and you get a click, not a boom, what may have happened is you did not have this magazine seated all the way. This magazine, it's a 30-round magazine, so let's talk about this real quick. I want you to load 28 rounds in this magazine. Now with 28 rounds in the magazine, you're going to leave a little bit of compression room in the spring, so that when you go to insert the magazine into the mag well and the bolt is closed or the bolt carrier group is forward, there will be enough compression so that these rounds can get pushed down. If you have a 30-round magazine filled with 30 rounds, I'm not saying it can't be seated, but it's going to be difficult. I've even seen people with 29 rounds have a difficult time seating their magazine, saying there's something wrong with my gun. There's a good chance there's nothing wrong with your gun. Rather, you just didn't load it properly. So here's the other reason I like 28. When you talk about the 30-round magazine and loading it to 28 rounds, what orientation will I find the top round if I've loaded 28? Well, the answer is I'm going to find it on my right side as I'm looking at the back of the mag. So if I've got 28 rounds, I should be able to push this down and go about a knuckle deep. Just about this far. Yep, I got 28 rounds. So I know how many rounds are loaded into my weapon. Go ahead and get this back into this position here. So the reason I like the 28 rounds, if I insert this magazine and let's say I'm in my cruiser ready position and I jump out and I do, that wasn't a very good rack. Did I pick up a round? If I drop the magazine, what do I find? Now the top round orientation is actually on the left. That means even though I didn't do a great rack, I still picked up a round. If you ever want to press check, instead of pulling it back and trying to peek and say, oh yeah, now I've got some brass in there, I know I've got a hot gun. The problem with that is, what did I just do? I kept my bolt from going into battery. So I'd have to actually use my bolt forward, my forward assist to get my bolt into battery. There's an easier way to do this, and there's an easier way to do it in the dark. Simply drop the magazine, feel for the round orientation. I now feel the top round is on the left, so I know I've seated a magazine, or I've seated a round. I know that I've chambered a round because the magazine is properly seated. Now I do a push-pull. I know my weapon's hot. I know I'm ready to go back to work. During the class, I talked about the fact that I want you to be able to do this by feel and not always by sight. When I first introduced this bolt over brass malfunction, I talked about being able to visually identify the problem, looking over and seeing that your dust flap cover was closed, and it being closed means you never charged your weapon, because charging the weapon will obviously open up your dust flap. So now I want to talk about not being able to see it. It's dark 30. You don't see that the dust flap cover is closed. You don't see that your bolt is forward in the battery. You come up on target, click, not a boom. Maybe you hear the click, maybe you feel the click. You are always going to get a mushy trigger. Every time you get a mushy trigger, that means it's time to find out what's wrong with the gun. I roll the gun over, I can't see the problem. I can't visually identify it. I can't put the weapon back on safe as I come into my workspace. My steps are exactly the same. Push, pull the magazine, charging handle to the rear. Now that time I felt the charging handle come all the way back under tension, and I could feel it going forward under tension again as the buffer spring was pushing the bolt carrier group back into battery. So those are things that I can feel. Okay, the next malfunction I want to talk about is a stovepipe. Here's a stovepipe malfunction. I asked the question, what causes a stovepipe malfunction? The reality is foreign obstruction. That's going to be your biggest reason. So either you are holding the weapon and having your palm blocking the ejection port, or you are coming up onto a barricade and you're bracing yourself on a barricade, and now the ejection pathway is obstructed and that round can't clear. Again, what do I do, or how do I find that this is my problem? I come up on target, I pull the trigger, I've got a dead mushy trigger. If I roll the weapon over and attempt to assess and I cannot see the problem, what is my fix? Back into my workspace, push pull my magazine, grab my charging handle to the rear and let it go. That will clear my malfunction. Now the one thing that I'm doing, I'm not sure if I can have you see this in the video or not, is I am not holding this weapon straight up and down. I am canting it. The reason I'm canting it is so that I have gravity assist. Now it didn't matter when I had my bolt over brass malfunction which way I orientated the rifle. However, what you just experienced, or what you just saw, was me set up a different malfunction that is cleared the exact same way. So every time I get a dead mushy trigger, and after I attempt to visually identify it, I'm bringing the weapon into this workspace and I'm going through the same steps. Magazine, charging handle. So whether it was a bolt over brass or whether it was a stovepipe, that same clearance technique will fix it. Okay, now onto the double feed. Now, I want to talk about the double feed real quick. During the handgun class this year, we blamed an inanimate object with the rifle for the reason that we have double feed malfunctions. We blame the magazine. We talked about how this magazine, being a true double stack magazine, it's possible for these feed lips to get separated or get cracked and to have two rounds trying to occupy the same space, creating our double feed. However, I pose the question to you. How many mags are you going to have with you if you jump out of your patrol rig going to a hot call? How many are you going to have? One, maybe two? Hopefully you're going to have at least two. Some guys said they're going to have 3, 4. That's great. That's fantastic. Some guys who are grabbing the gun out of a safe at Judicial, you're probably going to have the magazine that comes in the gun, and maybe that's it. If you're under stress, you might forget to grab it. When I had jumped out on felony stops, absolutely, I jump out with my rifle, but that, even though I've got magazines in my door, that doesn't mean that I always finish that felony stop near my car and had access to those magazines again. So here's what I want to talk about with the double feed malfunction. Kind of some of the other train of thought that we've had is you have a double feed malfunction, it's this guy's fault. Ditch the magazine, get rid of it. I don't like that. I don't like that, not because it can't be the magazine's fault. It can. I don't like that because how often will you as the operator actually induce your double feed malfunction versus how often will your magazine induce it? If you are able to visually identify or visually check your mags and see that everything looks okay, it's probably not going to be the magazine that causes your malfunction. If you are seating your magazine and slapping it, if you could, I don't know if you could see that, but I just had a round kind of jump out. I'm going to try and hit it soft enough so I just put it right just like this. If I have this magazine, there's nothing wrong with this magazine. I put this magazine into my open bolt gun because it's my reload. That's the other reason I don't like it. For those of you who say, yeah, I always have two magazines, if it's a bad day and you've shot through an entire magazine and you have to do a reload, you're reloading perhaps into a locked open bolt. So you've got this big void. If you put the magazine in and slap it, and you get a round to volcano up and sit like this, then what could happen, or what will happen when that bolt carrier group comes forward and it strips this round off? You're going to create a double feed. You have the possibility of creating that double feed. Anything wrong with the magazine? Absolutely not. I do this, and now it's going to behave for me. I do this enough times. There was another round that volcanoed out. I do this enough times, and I can guarantee that I can create a volcano double feed. Some of you guys experienced that up on the range this year. Hey, Brett, or hey, instructor, I had this double feed malfunction. I don't know what happened. And then at the end of the class, now I know what happened. I slapped the magazine. And when I slapped the magazine, my bolt was locked to the rear. I volcanoed a round out. That's one way that you as the user can create a double feed. Now here's the other way. Okay, right now I've got my gun unloaded. As far as there's nothing in the chamber, my bolt is forward, and I've got my full-ish magazine here. If I were to grab my charging handle and do a piss-poor job of racking it and ride it forward, there we go. It took me a couple times to do it. There we go. Now I finally did a bad job racking it right away, and you can see what my problem is. So, is it possible for me to ride my charging handle forward and kind of double pump? And now what have I created? I've got two objects trying to go into the same space. The old methodology, the old ideology, come up, attempt to fire, it's not working, mushy trigger. I'm going to change my hand positions, lock the bolt to the rear, take this magazine out, and it must be the magazine's fault, so I'm going to get rid of it. And then I'm going to work this a couple times, make sure it's clear, and then feed a fresh magazine in. Now, I don't know if you can see, on my belt, I took off the other magazine. This is my second magazine. So instead of throwing this magazine away, I can now simply reinsert the magazine, charge the gun, and I'm hot and ready to go back to work. Again, not the magazine's fault, operator error. Okay, I want to talk about how to set up this double feed malfunction. So what I've done is I've locked my bolt to the rear. I insert the magazine, push, pull, it's seated. I then take a live round and I drop it on top of my magazine. So it's just sitting in there, right? I'm going to hit my bolt release, my bolt catch. I now have a double feed of 2 rounds attempting to occupy the exact same space. Here's how I clear it. Put the fire, pull the trigger. I get a mushy dead trigger. I roll it over because that is my first step in trying to identify the problem. It's dark 30, I can't see the issue. I bring the gun into my workspace, I push pull the magazine, I grab the charging handle. Again, the charging handle will tell you what's wrong with the weapon. Half dead, dead, alive. So I have a half dead, half alive charging handle. Once I've felt that, my fix is simply to remove the magazine. Now I'm going to keep positive control of this magazine because I don't want to discard it for the reasons we've already talked about. I'm going to grab the charging handle, I'm going to pull it to the rear for a half a second and let it go. You on the video were able to see the 2 rounds falling out, or maybe you only saw 1 round. It doesn't matter. I am not looking or listening to see if the rounds fell out. I am going by feel. I felt my bolt go forward into battery. Once I know my bolt's in the battery, I push pull the magazine, charge it, and now I have a hot weapon again, and I'm ready to go back to work. Okay, I'm going to set the same malfunction up one more time to show you another possibility that you may encounter. I drop the round back in, release the bolt forward. I've got the exact same double feed. Some people who came up to the range found that as they were going through the steps and they were attempting to clear the malfunction, when they would pull the magazine or pull the charging handle to the rear, those rounds would not free fall. There's a couple things that could happen. If your chamber is gunked up and dirty, that might be causing your problem. If you continually hammer this over and over and over, you are just jackhammering. Let me try and show you what's going on. I'm pulling the bolt to the rear and I am whacking into those rounds. So it's like I'm trying to wedge them in even tighter. So is it possible that I could wedge them in? Absolutely. Is it likely that, or is it possible that they won't fall out? Sure, it's possible. We had at least one student find that as they were doing this malfunction, when they had the weapon straight up and they were trying to clear the problem, it was always jamming. But as soon as they rotated the gun over and they got some gravity assistance, they were falling out. But I'm going to go ahead and show you what happens when you when they don't free fall. Let's see if they're going to free fall after I've hammered them several times. Okay, they did free fall. That's fine. That just means I'll have less problems in the future. So let me set this up again real quick. And let's pretend that they won't free fall. So I go through all of my steps. Attempt to fire, mushy trigger. I look, I can't see the problem. Workspace, push, pull. Oh, now I know what my problem is. I got a half dead, half live charging handle. I've got a double feed. I pull the magazine out. But instead of keeping the gun in this orientation here, I'm going to drop it down. I'm going to drop it down so that you can see what happens when I pull the charging handle to the rear. The rounds stay put. Now the reason the rounds are staying put is because gravity isn't giving me an assist on this. That's my fault. If they are wedged in there and they are not coming out, instead of changing my grips, all I want you to do is rotate your firing hand under. I take a finger and I'm pushing it up. Pull the charging handle to the rear, and I'm just feeling for the rounds to move. Once I have felt the rounds move, pull my finger out, let go. Now I've heard and felt that bolt go into battery. Okay, a round just fell out, it was in my hand. Whether you know 1 or 2 rounds fell out is irrelevant. All you need to know is, did my bolt go back into battery? If your bolt went back into battery, you're ready to load your weapon again. Push, pull, charging handle, and now I'm ready to go back to work. It is possible that if you have to finger the rounds loose out of your weapon, that you will actually knock one of the rounds into the chamber. If you knock that round into the chamber, just remember that not all these rounds are going to be in pristine condition after a malfunction. So had I accidentally knocked a round into the chamber, how would I know that? I'm not going to look for it. I'm not going to attempt to make that happen, but it doesn't matter. My gun is in battery, my bolt is forward, I've inserted push-pull my magazine, and I've charged it. I just had a round get kicked out. Now that was a viable round that I had already loaded, but let's pretend that that was the double-fed round. Had I knocked it into the chamber, maybe it wouldn't cause me any problems, but if it would, I would much prefer that I rack it. Also, there is no way for me to know that I have one in the chamber other than doing a press check in this fashion that we talked about not wanting to do. So we don't want to press check it that way. We're going to assume that that round, that nothing was chambered, or that if it was chambered, it's a bad round, and we're automatically going to charge that weapon again. Push, pull, charging handle, charge. Okay, another way that you can set up a double feed malfunction. This is not quite a double feed in the true sense of the word, because you don't have 2 rounds occupying the same space or attempting to occupy the same space, but it's set up, loaded magazine, bolt lock to the rear, drop a round in. I'm going to let it fall forward into the chamber. I'm not sure if you're going to get enough light to see that. There we go, you can barely see it. So I have a round in the chamber, I release the bolt. Okay, now my bolt has attempted to pick up the round from the magazine, and it's forcing it into the back of the round that's already chambered. That kind of malfunction can occur with that bad rack that I showed you with the charging handle. It's also possible that you can volcano a round and that maybe it'll slip down in there if you're holding your weapon in a downward orientation when you slap the magazine. Yeah, it's possible. Okay, the nice thing about this, you don't have to diagnose it any differently than a standard double feed. If I come up and attempt to fire, get a mushy trigger, and I roll this over, if I see, yep, I've got 2 rounds here, I clear it the same way. Now this time I visually identified it. Pull the magazine out, charging handle to the rear for half a second, let it go forward. I heard and felt the buffer spring pushing that bolt all the way forward into battery. I happened to see the rounds fall out. You're not looking for it, but it happened. Push, pull the magazine, charge it, and you're back into the fight the exact same way. So no matter what kind of double feed you have, the clearance is the same. The only extra step is the possibility that you may have to rotate this hand underneath to knock those rounds loose or dislodge them, and then allow gravity to take over. The question we're going to talk about is the failure to extract. And that is where the round actually stays in the chamber and doesn't get ejected or extracted after it's fired. Or maybe it hasn't been fired. Either way, you got a round stuck down there. So here, you might say, oh, well, that's what you just set up for your double feed. It's very close to it. Also, if while you're shooting your rifle or you experience this problem, if you have a round and get stuck in the chamber, it's going to require a little bit different fix. Let me pull my magazine out. If this round was actually stuck in the chamber like it is right now, then this is not going to pull it out. Now, so what could cause this problem? This problem could be caused by a very fouled up and gunked up chamber, and there's so much carbon buildup that basically that round is being held by all the garbage and the junk. You got to clean your weapon. Now, the way that I've seen this happen the most is somebody's up on the range and they're firing. They fire 300-400 rounds, and they have a round chambered. When they deck their gun, go down to the bathroom, go grab a sandwich, and they come back to their weapon a little while later. They try and manually pull the charging handle back, and it won't move. The bullet carrier group is forward, it's in battery, but it won't move. So what's happened? You've chambered a live round, it's sitting inside, and it's cooled down. And now everything that is in there gunked up is kind of ripping onto that. The way we're going to clear that out, one, if it's safe to do so, we can fire the round and have, without a mini explosion and that violence of that explosion inside the weapon, that may go ahead and rip it out or pull it out. If that doesn't work, or if it's not coming out, I'm going to remove the magazine from the weapon. I'm going to collapse the buttstock. Then I'm going to make sure that my muzzle is oriented in a safe position. I'm going to grab the charging handle on both sides. I'm going to bring it down and strike. I have my knee on the bench here. I'm going to strike into an object to force the charging handle to kind of rip that out. Now, that being said, if it's really dirty, really gunked up, that could work. If the reason you have the failure to extract is because of a broken extractor, or because the back of the shell, the back of the casing, the rim has actually been broken off, that's not going to work. If you've got broken parts, that's not going to work. So I'm going to jump forward and talk about the next malfunction, or the last malfunction, and that is the catastrophic malfunction. If your stuff breaks, if you have parts go down and break, no matter what you do out here on the range, it's not going to fix your problem. So you're going to have to take your gun apart when it's safe to do so and get it looked at by an armorer. If you're in the middle of a gunfight and you can't fix it, well, then you should be transitioning. But while we're talking about transitioning, I want to just say this. Where and when you transition from your primary shoulder-fired weapon to your sidearm is completely situational dependent. There is no reason that I should be transitioning to my handgun if my bad guy is 150 yards away chasing after a family of 4 with a machete. I grab my rifle out of the rack, I come up and I attempt to fire, and I get a click, not a boom. And why did I have that? Because I'm not set up, but because I had my magazine loaded, my bolt was forward, and I had not yet charged my weapon. If that happened, what should I do? If I can do a quick assessment, great. Visually, then I know the problem. I forgot to charge it. If I don't see the problem, what do? I push pull and I charge it. And then when I charge it, I make my weapon hot and I can go ahead and get back to work. So I put myself on the shot timer, and I know some other people have done the same thing, that if I am shooting my rifle at the range and I'm shooting a drill and I run dry, I am faster at reloading my rifle than I am at transitioning to my handgun. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean that I will always transition to, or that I always reload my rifle versus transition to my handgun. If I fired at all these bad guys over here and I've run dry and all of a sudden I've got a bad guy coming at me from the other direction and he's 5 feet away, I just said I'm faster reloading my rifle versus transitioning. However, in that situation, that bad guy is going to be on me, and I will not be able to get my muzzle up and on him before he's already taken me to the ground or got his hands on me. So in that circumstance, by all means, I'm going to want to draw my handgun so I can shoot at him sideways when he's in my personal space or trying to disarm me or attack me or whatever the situation may be. So for each of you, it's going to come down to what are you comfortable with. If you never practice malfunctions or refunctioning of the weapon system, then you're always going to need to just transition. However, hopefully you can think of a time and a place where it's not wise to do that, and then that will motivate you to come up and practice your malfunctions. Situationally dependent. I can't stress that enough. I am not saying that one way is better than the other. I am saying that the circumstance has got to dictate your tactics. Okay, the last malfunction I want to show you is the brass over bolt malfunction. Brass over bolt. I've locked my I've locked my bolt to the rear, and you made note, I pushed my charging handle in. Make sure you do this. Anytime you lock your bolt to the rear, we want to make sure that this charging handle is not staying out. This is a flimsy piece of aluminum, and if I really wanted to, I can break it. But inside the weapon housing, inside my upper receiver, it's strong, and it's going to do its job. So for this malfunction, if you leave it back, you're going to create big problems. Make sure it's in. That should be a habit for you already. Bolt's locked to the rear, magazine is seated. I'm going to drop a round in. I'm going to rotate the gun upside down and point it to the sky. Now when I release the bolt catch, can you see? Yes, you can. See how I have a round over top of the bolt? That is going to cause me some problems, but not anything that I can't fix. So I'm up on gun, I pull the trigger, I get a dead mushy trigger. If I roll over, what might I assess this as immediately? I might think it's a double feed malfunction. Let's say I think it's a double feed malfunction. Oh, double feed, I bring it in. I know that my next step is to pull the magazine, grab the charging handle, and clear it. Okay, what do I find right now? This charging handle is completely locked in place. The reason it's locked in place is because that round on top of the bolt has created a cam, and it is wedged in there. So what am I going to do? I'm going to go ahead and keep, well, again, for the demonstration, for the purpose of this video, I'm going to keep positive control of this magazine. Your situation's got to dictate your tactics. If you have to go down to a knee, then I would suggest indexing this in front of your knee. That way you know where it's at in the dark. So I've removed the magazine. I come to the charging handle. Oh my gosh, it's locked in place. Reposition the buttstock on my body. Pull this back as far as I can. Catch it with the bolt catch. I put my thumb right here. Now my charging handle is back. My hand is right here. I'm going to create a flat surface. I'm going to knife edge straight down. So I'm going to knock that charging handle forward. I'm going to rotate the gun up. I'm going to hit the bolt release. My thumb was already right there holding the bottom. Now I heard and felt the bolt go into battery. I grab this magazine that was already in my hand, push pull, charge it, and I'm back in the fight. You guys saw the rounds fall out. I don't want this to be a, I saw the rounds fell out, or I'm looking for the rounds and yep, there they are, or I'm listening for the rounds. It's by feel. I want you to learn how to do this by feel. Now, it is possible to do this malfunction too fast and create another issue. Let me show you what I mean by that. Possibly. So, bolt's locked to the rear, magazine seated, I have a round sitting on top. I'm going to rotate the gun upside down. And you see it, it just fell into the charging handle groove. Tip it skyward, hit my bolt catch. Okay, I've just created this malfunction. I'm going to do this one pretending I don't see the problem. Attempt to fire. Nothing. Mushy trigger. No idea. Push pull the magazine. Oh, now I know I have a brass over bolt. This charging handle is going nowhere. Pull this out, readjust, pull this back, lock it, slam it, try and catch it. Okay? Does that look different than what I had? Yes, it does. Did I just create a new malfunction? Yes, I did. I didn't even think to show you this is what happened. So I have got one round that is stuck in my ejection port, and if I were to take that out, you can also see what? I still have a round. I'm not sure if you can see that. There you go. Can you see that I have a round in my chamber? Absolutely. So when I cleared this, I went so fast, I didn't allow gravity to kind of help me out. Send that bolt forward. The other thing that can happen while you're doing this malfunction quickly is I now have a round in the chamber. My bolt is forward. If I do that malfunction clearance too fast, or if I'm trying to rush myself because I want to catch that round, that's a problem, because I won't always catch it, one, and two, that round is not in good shape. But I just heard and felt my bolt go into battery. Okay, I heard it, I felt it, push pull the magazine, it's in. I'm gonna grab my charging handle now and charge, and you'll see one come out. Okay, that round, there's too many rounds on the ground, I'm not gonna look for it. That round has been damaged. And again, just like the double feed malfunction earlier where we had to finger the rounds loose, I don't want to count on that round. I just want to rack it again. I want to charge the weapon and make it hot. Okay, so to wrap up, I don't want you to think that because I showed you a bunch of malfunctions on the Era platform, that the Era platform has got problems. It really doesn't. It is a proven, reliable, and very effective weapon system. The reasons that you will have problems or run into some of these malfunctions that we just went over are usually going to be user-generated, operator error. You may have a part break, and if you have a part break and you have a catastrophic malfunction, yeah, no matter what you do on the range, you're probably not going to get that weapon back up and running, and you're going to need to wait until you can get it back to the armory, and we can take a look at it and replace parts and fix it. If you are maintaining your weapon and keeping it properly lubed and oiled, you won't have any problems. I encourage you to come up here and practice these problems. These problems can occur, and when they occur, we as professional law enforcement officers need to know how to clear them. We need to know how to refunction our rifle and how to do so as efficiently and smoothly as possible. We rarely have people come up to the range for rifle quals and not qualifying on the first go. The rifle, the AR platform rifle, is a very easy to operate weapon. And it being an easy to operate weapon, people kind of take it for granted, and they don't think they need to practice as much because I got 100% on the qual, I'm good to go. Well, hopefully you can get a little push from this video or from something else that doesn't cause injury or death to anybody in a real deal, in a real environment, that makes you say, I want to get better with my weapon. I want to get better with this weapon system. I want to practice malfunction clearances, refunctioning the weapon system. If you come up and practice this, you're going to end up finding that you are damaging a lot of the rounds that are getting kicked out of your gun. So here's one right now. On first inspection, all I saw was a couple scrapes right here, and I thought, oh, it's okay. And then as I rotated it over, I noticed that there is a big little dip right here, a big gouge put in this. This round has no business going back into a magazine or being reintroduced into one of your weapons, whether it's a personally owned or whether it's a duty gun. So if and when you come up and practice malfunctions, make sure that you're not just picking up rounds off the ground and throwing them back into your mag. We have had that happen up here where somebody saw, oh, live rounds, let's pick them up, and they threw them back in the box for somebody else to load later. So if you're practicing malfunctions, please, please, please be cognizant and aware. Now, the 4 firearm safety rules still apply when you're doing this. Okay, if you watch the entire video, good for you. If you fast forward to this part, that's fine. I'm just going to do the clearances first by sight. Okay. Okay. Double feed. We'll pretend I didn't just run empty on that.